Hello everybody, this is Sarah Scott on behalf of the Centre for Hellenic Studies in Washington DC. I'm here with Leonard Muellner, and we've been looking again at the forum discussions for Ancient Greek Hero. One of the discussions we'd like to start with here is Achilles doing the right thing when he refuses to fight, when he withdraws from the battle?
Okay, well, this is a complicated thing. It's the first thing that you come across in the Iliad, and I think in the discussion, people have made a lot of very interesting points and are trying to rebuild, so to speak, what the value system and the moral system seems to be in the Iliad, and I think that's the way to approach this. I think the most common first impression that we get is Achilles is a spoiled brat who's sulking in his tent, okay, or something like that. And I think you have to get beyond that. Okay, that's not the way the Iliad portrays him. Someone pointed out that nobody seems to criticize Achilles for withdrawing from the battle. They're all worried about the consequences of it, but nobody seems to say that he did the wrong thing. Someone points out that he's at the point that he's about to kill Agamemnon for the offense that he's done him. Okay, so what is that offense? It's not just it's an insult to his honor, to his prestige, and the prestige is something very important in this society. Something that everyone has a way of calculating, and that is something that we are not built to be sensitive to. Okay, I think within the epic world, the concept is that everybody knows where everyone else is in the hierarchy, and when you do something positive, your prestige increases, and when you do something negative, it decreases. Okay, and the symbols of the prestige are the ways in which the society as a whole honors you. So just to take one little step back, okay, when Achilles has a talk with his mother, when he weeps to his mom, okay, this is another thing that's not especially macho for Americans anyway, when he weeps on the seashore in the middle of book 1, and his mom comes and consoles him, he tells what's really the beginning of the Iliad, if you want. He says, well, I did all this fighting and I brought all this stuff back, and he's obviously uncontestably the greatest of the warriors, and he brings the most amount of stuff, and he put it in the middle. Okay, this is a way of symbolically saying this belongs to everybody. And then there's a process of division that takes place of the stuff, which includes people and things. This is not a society that distinguishes property into people and things, but between movable and immovable property. Okay, so people are movable like cattle, and immovable property are like beautiful objects, tapestries, gold and silver things and stuff like that. So that's what the booty consists of. So, and then there's a communal process of the division of the spoils, and the community as a whole decides on the basis of their understanding of who has the higher prestige, who gets which prize. And the community gave Agamemnon his prize, who's this girl Chryseis, the daughter of the priest Chryseis, and Achilles got Briseis. Okay, and what happens in the beginning of the Iliad is that Agamemnon messes up, okay, by refusing to ransom Chryseis his prize. So as a result, okay, you have to understand that messing up means your prestige goes down, okay? And Agamemnon's way of getting his prestige back to the level where it was is say, okay, I need another girl. This is a messed up way of thinking about how the society works. There's some kind of relationship between what you do and your prestige. It's not simply the symbols of prestige that give you prestige. You get the symbols of prestige because you do things that are positive for the group, okay? So instead of thinking in those terms, Agamemnon says, my prestige has gone down. I need a new girl, okay? And he says, I'll take yours, Achilles, or anyone else's, right? And that makes Achilles very angry, because that's not the way the system worked, which is a system in which you have a reciprocal exchange of people and things for activities, right? The better you are in the social terms, the more stuff you get, okay? Instead, Agamemnon says, here's my status. I've lost the girl, so it's lowered. I have to get back up to that status. Not I have to do something to get back to that status. So he takes away Achilles' prize, okay, ends up doing that. And that at that point, Achilles is ready to kill him, okay? Because taking away someone's woman, well, that's what they're all there for, right? Because Paris took away Helen, right? This is the women are the most expensive and valuable forms of mass property in this culture, okay? So this is not fighting about nothing. This is fighting about things that are essential to the whole enterprise. This is not petty, being a petty brat and sacrificing the community's interest for your own petty honor. This is about the fundamental things that motivate group actions and group sense of responsibility and the ties that bind people together, which are the ties of exchange. And Achilles says, we came here, Agamemnon, in order to help you, to give you honor and to get back some in exchange. Okay, that there has to be a give and take for this group of warriors to survive. Okay, and so when he's about to kill Agamemnon, that seems to be the appropriate response. But it's Athena who stops him and says, "Do it with words." One of the participants points this out, and that strikes a chord with us moderns. We're not supposed to act out aggression. We're supposed to verbalize it. Okay, and that's a virtue for us. But I think it's a strange response in a certain sense in this culture. And what Achilles does is, instead of going away or harming Agamemnon, he stays there. Okay, and he says, "I'm here, but I'm not a member of your group anymore." It's a very anomalous sort of situation that he's in. Okay, he hasn't left. He hasn't gone away, and he hasn't hurt anybody, but he has expressed his bad opinion, okay? And then his mother goes and gets Zeus to approve of this sort of thing, which it's described with this word menis. That's the first word of the Iliad, this special kind of anger. And if you look at other situations where gods have menis, it's like Apollo has menis in the beginning of the Iliad. Okay, why does Apollo have menis? Well, it's because Agamemnon did this terrible thing to his priest, Chryses, okay, in not participating in the exchange of stuff for his daughter. So you get a whole massive plague on the whole army in exchange for, that's how Apollo expresses his menis, okay? So in a sense, you can see that this is a cosmic sort of anger that gets expressed on a massive scale for a large social offense, okay? Now, I think we have to start thinking about Achilles in terms that are set by Apollo's anger and see that there's a big offense to the basic assumptions of the society. And one thing that Achilles says about all the other Achaeans is that they're all a bunch of nobodies because none of them is standing up for what the rules are. Okay, they're all, for example, in favor of Agamemnon exchanging doing the exchange with a priest at the beginning of the poem, but none of them has the guts to stand up for Achilles, is the way he thinks of it. So they've bankrupted themselves, right? But Achilles is very explicit about the fact that he's withdrawing when he says he's going to withdraw. And he makes the oath on the scepter. He says that there will be a longing for me that happens when lots of people die under the arms of manslaying Hector. And when that starts that we get the sense that things are going badly, okay, by the time you get to the 9th book of the Iliad, because the Trojans have camped on the plain. But there's been a lot of fighting going on in the interim between scroll 1 and scroll 9, and things are bad enough for the Achaeans to get together and try and ask Achilles to return to the fighting. But Diomedes has done a lot of killing. Agamemnon's done some killing too. Others have. Greeks have died. Trojans have died. There's a big battle between Hector and Ajax that ends in a draw, okay? But in terms of major heroes on both sides, okay, no one has yet been killed, right? And in this battle, that's the key point. Okay, the battle is no longer clearly on the Achaeans in charge and being the aggressors, and the Trojans being defenders inside their own city. The Trojans have taken the battle to the Achaeans, and the Achaeans have built themselves a wall. So you can see the tables have been turned. Okay, and there are individuals on both sides who have perished. But actually, if you look at the way the text plays itself out, there's no great warrior. Okay, this is battles are single combats. Okay, are the major vehicle for battle in the Iliad, and in those single combats, no one gets killed. No great warrior gets killed until Patroklos kills Sarpedon in the 16th book of the Iliad. Okay, that's a Trojan warrior, and then Patroklos himself gets killed by a combination of Hector, Euphorbos, and Apollo. Okay, there are three people who are involved in killing him. So really the first great Greek to die, the great Achaean hero to die in the Iliad is Patroklos. Okay, so I think it's easy to run away with the idea that Achilles has abandoned all of his friends. Okay, but lots of people have been wounded. Okay, but no one dies until Patroklos dies. So it's important to get a sense of just what the social situation is and how responsive Achilles is to the demands of the group. And here's one last thing about this. Okay, why does Patroklos get sent out into battle? Okay, who's responsible for making him go out and fight in Achilles' place, in being Achilles' therapon? Okay, well, let's go back to the way this all worked. Okay, it goes back to a moment it's actually happens in I'm getting fuzzy about the point, but there's a point when Achilles, he's withdrawn from the fighting. Okay, he's not fighting, but he's watching everything happen. Okay, he's sitting at his ship and he watches. And at one point, there's a warrior who gets carried off the field of battle, and Achilles can't see who it is. Okay, he says I couldn't tell who it was, but I think it's Machaon, who's the healer, the healer among the Achaeans, the person who helps people get well from wounds, and he thinks it's him. So he sends out Patroklos to the hut. This wounded warrior is being taken to the hut of Nestor. So he sends out Patroklos to find out who it is. And Patroklos goes to Nestor's hut, and Nestor tells a long, very interesting story, which it needs to be understood too, but because very relevant to what happens. But at the end, Nestor says, Patroklos, you should go and ask Achilles to let you dress up in his armor and go help the Greeks. Okay? So it's Nestor's idea that this happened. And then Patroklos comes in the beginning of the 16th book of the Iliad and says, what's the matter with you, Achilles? Why aren't you helping us out here? Okay. And is it because you're, something bad has happened at your home or whatever it is? And then he says, you're like a rock in the sea and you're unfeeling. Okay. But Achilles says, no, that's not the case. Okay. But and it's not that I'm being inflexible. He says, in fact, now's the time for me to give in. Okay, and I'm giving what he does. I think this is easy to misunderstand, and the passage is not really correctly translated in any of the translations, I think. But anyhow, that's another story. But what Achilles does is to accept Patroklos's request that he dress up as himself. Okay, it's not that Achilles says, I'm not going to fight anymore. He actually sends out Patroklos at the time when he said he was going to fight, back in the 9th book of the Iliad, okay, when the battle comes to the ships and when they set fire. So he really is setting up Patroklos to be himself, okay, in terms of the plot. And it's Patroklos who's asked for it, all right? So let's be careful about agency and social boundaries and who's doing what to the group, okay, and try and understand the way the text is portraying these things a little bit more closely, okay? maybe those are helpful thoughts in trying to understand if Achilles is doing the right thing. The right thing is a modern concept in itself, but there's a lot of things going on here, and there are a lot of agencies going on, and a lot of conflicting people's and divine interactions and other things happening. So it's not so easy to blame one person. It's a nice thing that we try to do in daily life. It doesn't even work very well for us, right?
Yeah. So how does that tie in with the idea of Patroklos as the therapon, sort of almost like a ritual sacrifice, substitute, scapegoat almost?
Yeah. So there are some really beautiful points being made about this. How you have in the background of this notion of therapon, and it's the historical background. This word originally is a loan word from Hittite and originally meant a person who dies as a ritual substitute for the king. Someone asked, whose sins is this scapegoat expiating? Okay, and then the ritual context of the Hittite king, if you look at the tablets, it's not the king's sins. Okay, the king is the representative of the whole community. This ritual scapegoat purifies everyone for everyone's sins. Okay, I think we all understand that concept. There are very obvious modern parallels that have survived from antiquity to this idea. Okay, of one person dying for everyone's sins. So it's not that he's dying because Achilles messed up by getting angry. Okay, that's clearly not on the surface. And below the surface is this idea of the warrior who dresses up in another person's. It takes on another person's identity and dies in a way that purifies the group. Okay, but that's not on the surface meaning of the story. That's something that's built into the substructure of it. And another idea is that I think it's important to understand that as a historical phenomenon, but it's also important to see that on another level that's no longer clear to the poet or his audience. Okay, it's important to try and understand in both the historical and the other terms, and in the contemporary terms, how things work. But it isn't easy in a medium like this, which is conservative and keeps on accumulating things in a traditional song culture. It isn't easy to say where the historical thing stops being meaningful and the modern one comes in, because you keep on reusing and reinventing the meaning of things. Okay, so it's pretty clear that Patroklos is a substitute for Achilles. He dresses up in his armor, and the way he dies, we even have other things. When Patroklos dies, Achilles warns by stretching himself out on the ground and pouring ashes on himself as though he were a dead body. Okay, so and there are other things like that. So there are resemblances even in the way Patroklos dies to what we know about the death of Achilles. So there's a lot of story resonance, and there are these things bubbling to the surface about the relationship between the two, the identity relationship, and the notion that a friend is another self. Okay, which is another meaning of therapon, is a person who heals the group also by taking on another person's identity, and this person is someone who is extremely close to you. So there are a lot of different threads being interwoven here. I don't think you want to think of it. Someone suggested that this is the genius of Homer. This is the genius of the way a tradition works. It has lots of different levels of meaning that get re-semanticized and redeveloped into a very rich and deep threads of meaning, and we can kind of try and appreciate them. But but one shouldn't immediately assume that Patroklos is like the scapegoat, okay, because that's not on the surface, but it is underlying the story. And I think we're familiar with these sorts of things. In our culture, we have stories of heroes and sidekicks, okay. It's the lone. My generation was the Lone Ranger and his faithful Indian companion Tonto, okay, and the Lone Ranger was a masked man, and he didn't know who he was, okay. Tonto would go into the town and talk to people, and he was the nice guy, and the Lone Ranger was the sort of distant person. But the two of them together were this great combo, and they made the world safer and a better place, okay. But I think literature is full of these great heroes who are austere and somewhat remote, and have a human side who's visualized as a more friendly person, okay? So this isn't a story pattern in lots of different cultures, and I think we can see that often the friendly one is the person who dies, okay, the one with the human side. So this is something that has meaning and can be given different kinds of meaning in different sorts of cultural contexts. But you see this sort of thing in war movies, in a modern American culture. Okay, there's the great hero, and then there's the nice guy who dies. Okay, who's his companion. I think this. Can you think of other examples, Sarah? Does anything come to mind?
You're putting me on the spot here. I can't think
of
anything immediately. Right. It'll come when we finish the.
But yes, exactly. I bet we can come up with some.
Perhaps some of our participants can think of others and maybe put that into the forum and share those ideas. So you were talking about Patroklos and how he dies, and you also talked about the anger of Achilles being like the anger of Apollo, and then we see Apollo. So how does that relationship all play out, particularly in terms of this sort of fatal attraction? Somebody asked, is Patroklos trying to kill Apollo, but is he attracted to him? How does that all work?
Okay, so I think this is an important part of the whole story too. This notion of the hero, in which the hero is related to and has a particular struggle with a god or a goddess. Depends. Sometimes it's a goddess who's most closely related to a hero, and there can be a hostile relationship as well as a friendly relationship between these two. And how does that work? I think if you look, the best example of this is what Patroklos does with Apollo in the 16th scroll of the Iliad, and the two encounters that he has with Apollo. So to this, it speaks to this notion of the fatal attraction, because what happens is the first time Patroklos charges at the wall of the Trojans. Okay, and you may remember that Achilles told Patroklos not to go and try and capture Troy. Okay, he posed a limit for him, because that would really be bad for his honor. He says, okay, if Patroklos actually succeeded, but just give them some breathing room. But anyway, so as Patroklos approaches the wall, he drives at it 3 times. Okay, this is doing something 3 times a regular concept in the poem. You have lists of 3, groups of 3, and the third one usually completes it. But instead of stopping the 3rd time when he fails, the 4th time he tries again, okay, which is sort of overstepping a limit in itself. And when he does that, Apollo appears to him, and Apollo is at the wall itself. This is not a coincidence, because Apollo is a god who sets boundaries and who presides over certain kinds of taboos. Okay, this is part of his function. It's not what we're used to thinking of him as being, but it's an important part of his functionality. So he's at the wall, and he stops Patroklos, and he says, you can't do this. Okay, even Achilles can't do this, and you're not as great a hero as he is. Okay, and so Patroklos withdraws, but then he does it again a 2nd time, and he does it again 3 times, and the 4th time, that's when he gets whacked by Apollo and Euphorbos and Hector. There are 3 agents to his death. Okay, so this is idea. One of the things that you say about Patroklos when he's doing this is that he's, in Greek you say daimonesos. This is equal esos to a divinity when you're doing these incredible things in battle, and the divinity can change. Sometimes it's Ares that a warrior is equal to. For example, Diomedes in the fourth scroll of the Iliad has a scene where he's Daimon-Isos, and it's very clear that he's like the war god incarnate. Okay, and one of the things that you can also say about all the warriors is that they're therapontes. Here's this word therapon again of Ares, right? They're impersonators of the war god. So this attraction to Ares or Apollo in this particular case is about trying to rise up to the level in human terms of the divinity. It's obviously a desire for excellence. Is I think the killing part of it comes from the fact that gods don't die, human beings do. Okay, so in a certain sense, when you're trying to rise to the level of a god and be equal to him or her, you're transcending the boundary between immortality and mortality. So death is an assertion of the fact that you're not a god. Okay, and so the fatalness of it is a desire to transcend something that's built into the way the world works. At the same moment, it's something extraordinarily great about you that you can get to that point. At the same time, it's very dangerous because you can't cross that line. Okay, that would really mess things up. So I think you want to understand the fatal attraction, not in terms of a desire for death, so much as a desire to transcend the human level, which in itself is about being competitive and being great and being greater than everyone else. But at the same time, it's something that you can't get past. Okay, so Diomedes respects that boundary. Patroklos tries a second time when he's been already warned off to go past it. So the first time he retreats, the second time he does not, and that's when he dies. So you can see that there's a sort of there's greatness being allowed. You're allowed to do it, okay, up to a certain point, and then that's it. Okay, you've gone too far twice. Okay, I think it's a very interesting way of symbolizing all these things, and powerful too, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Leonard. Okay, thanks. Until next time.
Okay, great.